Pseudo-legendaries are some of the most powerful Pokemon, at least aside from the actual legendaries in the franchise. While most pseudo-legendaries, especially in games like Scarlet and Violet, are fairly impactful in VGC, some of the best are only really this relevant due to the fact they have some really good signature moves. For example, we have some like Pult that really rely on any relevancy thanks to Dragon Darts, which is a smart targeting option, and Glaive Rush Excalibur was a huge wall breaker in some of these lower power level formats. But why don't all pseudo-legendaries have their own signature moves attached to them? Despite being some of the most impactful Pokemon in the franchise, they're kind of just left with some ordinary move pools. Today, I want to look at what some of the best options could be to give all of these pseudo-legendaries their own unique signature move, or at least making them as unique as possible, while still giving them some actual longevity to make sure they can survive in future gens. If you guys like these types of videos on the channel and you want to see more content like it, of course, make sure to let me know down below what other topics you'd like to see, as I'm sure there are plenty of other Pokemon that might be deserving of their own signature moves, such as the starters or other groups of Pokemon. Also, while you're on the way down there, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I upload a ton of content just like this, and I'm sure there are tons of videos on the channel you would enjoy if you like this one. And we're on the way to 5,000, and I'd love to hit that by the end of the year. Finally, if you want to give some extra support on the channel, check out the membership button where we already have options like polls that you can see starting tomorrow for the next series of Pokemon we're going to be buffing stat-wise. And starting with next video, we're going to be uploading these on Thursday for early access for members, while normal non-paying members will get these on Sundays. With all that said though, let's head off to Kanto, where we're going to be talking about one of the most infamous pseudo-legendaries of all time, Dragonite. Starting off with Dragonite, I wanted to give this an albeit pretty cliche signature move, especially considering Generation 9's options, but it is rather appropriate. Now, Dragonite is known for having a pretty terrible flying stab, at least on the physical side, so I wanted to make sure that its signature move would be something that could really account for this. The easiest solution is some sort of flying type move that is either really high base damage with no drawback, or something on the weaker end that has a legitimate secondary effect, as opposed to a move like Aerial Ace and Wing Attack. My suggestion would be giving it a signature move that's pretty similar to Jet Punch, but instead it'd be a flying type option for Dragonite. Because flying is a lot more potent than water type moves, and we can really see that just from how well flying matches up into most types, I do think that we need to cut the base power by a little bit, so I want to make this only a base 50 flying type move, which on Dragonite will still be considerably stronger than most other priority options. With Terra Flying Dragonite, this would go up to base 60 immediately, and on top of that as well, it would also just get a base power boost thanks to the fact that it's getting another stab increase from flying type Terra, and it would suddenly become a very obnoxious wall breaking move for it. Because of this new flying type priority move, Dragonite can now more safely run a choice band set, and it would still be able to pressure Flutter Mane really easily, which is a huge wall for a lot of these Terra normal E-Speed builds. I'm thinking the best name for this move would probably be Sky Strike, as it would be a cool way to pay tribute to Supersonic Sky Strike, which was a really good Fly Name Z move in Generation 7. This would immensely help Dragonite going forward, and while I know this isn't exactly the most unique choice this generation, I do think that we have a lot of other interesting options to make up for it later on, and it really does fit thematically with how Dragonite has been used this generation and what's made it the best in the past. Generation 2 gave us probably one of the most unique and dynamic pseudo-legendaries of all time, Tyranitar. It's very unique in terms of its typing, as it's one of the two non-dragon type pseudo-legendaries. It also has the only weather setting ability among the bunch, and its sheer versatility in movesets is very hard to be rivaled among every Pokemon that has ever been created. Well, it is missing one thing: a truly viable 100% accurate rock type move. So let's give it one. Well, this is a very boring way to approach this. Most rock type moves have imperfect accuracy, especially on the physical side, and it is very rare to find one with 100% accuracy. So for the typing at least, this is a really big deal. I think with no secondary effect and just a strong 95 base power signature rock type move with 100% accuracy would be a really strong pick for Tyranitar. As well as giving up the spread damage and flinch chance of Rock Slide, being able to hit one Pokemon 100% of the time is a really big deal for a rock type stab, as it's probably really only beaten by flying for the best stab typing in the game. While you could argue that the fact that Rock Slide still might get some usage on Tyranitar due to the fact that it is spread and it could flinch both opponents potentially, at the same time, with Tyranitar's slower speed stat, I don't think this is as big of a deal as some sort of faster rock type with Rock Slide, and you still could definitely interchange them, or even run both on the same set, I would argue. So I think there's still a lot of value to gain from both still running Rock Slide, which is one of the best offensive moves in the game, and also the signature move, which I think we're going to call Rock Crash, but I'm going to be honest, I really didn't have a lot of good names for this that would be better. Generation 3 is the only generation that gave us 2 pseudo legendaries, yet neither of them have a signature move. Starting off with Salamence, I want to look into giving it a good means of taking advantage of Intimidate, as it's really useful on Salamence and it's probably the best way to give it a good identity, but it's one of the few Intimidate mons that's really viable without a good means of pivoting. And with a flying type version of U-turn, I think we can make it cook. Because it's a far greater typing than Bug or Electric, at least for an offensive stab, I do think we should lower this to base 60 as opposed to our other pivoting moves. But I still think it would be a really good physical momentum gainer for Salamence, and it would allow it to much easier cycle Intimidate. Salamence has been good at utilizing itself as a choice scarf option, especially on Rain, and it could still definitely do this with this type of move. I think we'd probably see the flying type U-turn move, Hurricane, Draco Meteor, and Tailwind become a new normal set on Salamence, and it would deal a lot to a lot of opponents, as you would not only be able to actually pivot Salamence in and out to get Intimidate farming for Rain, but you still could use options like Hurricane for 100% accuracy, Draco Meteor for just a powerful dragon stab, and even Tailwind to still get some speed control in. As for the name, I kind of like the idea of calling it Dragon Glide. As well, this is a flying type move, it would pay a lot of tribute to the Mega evolution for Salamence, which used its wings to just kind of glide around in the air without needing to flap them. And I think Dragon Glide being a good way to kind of just fly back into your team slot would fit really well thematically. As for the other pseudo legendary in Hoenn, we're going to take a look at our first status oriented move. While this is a certainly rather simple option to pursue, I think a steel type variation of Coil would be a really big deal in Metagross. While Metagross has some respectable bulk, I think having a great way to improve both its attack and defense stat while also increasing accuracy to make Meteor Mash and Rock Slide a lot more consistent could be a seriously big deal for Metagross. Since your opponent can't even slow down the attack boost you'd be given thanks to Clear Body, this would become a very powerful option for the Iron Titan. While you could argue that the speed would be a slightly bigger deal in Metagross, I think it's not as important, as the accuracy and making sure Meteor Mash, which is its strongest steel stab, would be a perfectly accurate move, would, I think, give a lot more options to Metagross and make it a lot better of a win con. Also, to make up for the non-speed boost you'd be getting, Blow Punch is still a really incredible move, and with +1 attack, this is going to hit like a truck against most opponents. I think the best name for it would be Clear Coat, as it would not only kind of go along with Clear Body, which is the ability you would run with this, but considering Metagross was created in Hoenn, the generation where abilities and Clear Body itself were made, I think it'd be a pretty cool way to pay tribute to the Hoenn roots that really made Metagross the Pokemon that it is. One of the strongest pseudo legendaries of all time, regardless of the format you play, has got to be Garchomp. Now, Garchomp is a pretty terrifying dragon and ground type, and it has 2 monstrous abilities, being Rough Skin and Sandfell. While Rough Skin is typically the easier option to throw into most Garchomp sets, Sandfell has been picking up a lot this gen, and I think it'd be a pretty cool way to actually make a unique signature move here. I'm thinking for Garchomp, we give it a base 70 ground type move called Dust Haze that would set the sand up for you if it does land, which I think would be a pretty good way to enable Sandville for Garchomp. While Stomping Tantrum is still a pretty considerable option, at the same time, since Stomping Tantrum's best effect is that if it fails, it deals double damage, I think getting a more consistent secondary effect that would activate every time, being the Sand activation, would be a lot more impactful on Garchomp, especially with Sandville being a really incredible defensive ability for it. While we could also just give Garchomp a move like Headlong Rush, I don't really think it's going to be as impactful, and I think that the utility this would provide Garchomp would be a big deal, as not only would Garchomp benefit a lot from this, but a lot of partners that are weak to teams that are very threatened by Sun or Rain would also very much appreciate a damaging move that can just completely change the weather. I think this would find the best success in Sword Stance movesets, as with the weaker base 70 damage, this would be benefited a lot by a +2 attack Garchomp. And considering the fact that it's not that much weaker than Stomping Tantrum, you would become very potent in just 1 turn after a Sword Stance, making sure that you could KO most opponents without being touched as often thanks to Sandville. I think this can make Garchomp a genuinely potent threat in VGC again, instead of an option that just kind of pops up here and there, and it would be a huge factor in allowing Garchomp to kind of just keep up with the power creep that we've gotten in recent generations. Until the time of writing this video, I genuinely believed that Unova had 2 different pseudos. However, thanks to research, I learned that Volcarona is not actually a pseudo. Even if it was, I also forgot until just this moment that Volcarona actually has a signature move in Fiery Dance, since we do now see it on Iron Moth. But I want to see if you guys also thought Volcarona was a pseudo, as I feel like it is probably among the semi-pseudo class, the most confusable for a pseudo legendary. So if you also thought it was a pseudo legendary, comment down below. With that said, we do still have one other pseudo legendary to talk about in Unova, and it's probably one of the best pseudo legendaries of all time, being Hydreigon, which used to be a very dominant threat in VGC, and it kind of ran the game in generations 5 and 6. It still has found some success in later generations, such as a little bit in generation 8, and it definitely ran the game in regulation A, and it still is doing some good work in regulation H at least. I figured a signature move that could be beneficial to Hydreigon would be something it kind of leans into its Dragon Stab. As while Draco Meteor is a cool option for it, I think something a little bit better might be beneficial. I'm gonna call it Dragon Barrage, and this would be a specially offensive move, which this is the first signature move on the special end we've created today somehow. Essentially, this move would hit 3 times for a Dragon Stab typing, with each hit doing 25 damage. If this sounds familiar, that's because we're also going to be basing it off of Surgeon Strikes, just a special Dragon type version, and we'll make sure that every hit gets a guaranteed critical hit chance. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys have in the comments, before even thinking about the logistics of this move, have been hammering away at how broken this move would be because Surgeon Strikes on our Shifu Rapid is, but there's a lot of things that actually get kind of balanced out because this is a Dragon type stab. For one, Hydreigon cannot break through Protect, so it does immediately give you some actual defensive counterplay here. But I think the bigger deal is the fact that unlike with Surgeon Strikes, we have a whole type instead of just an ability like Storm Train that is completely immune to it. Fairy is probably the best typing in the game as far as the defensive typing goes, and having a move that completely cannot touch Fairy types, especially with Hydreigon's 4x weakness, would be a pretty big deal against it. However, with the move being so threatening against any non-Fairy type, I think it's a good way to balance it. I think this also kind of fits in line with how Hydreigon has been used in Generation 9, as it's found some of the best success it's had all generation thanks to these Scope Lens crit sets that are typically featuring around Focus Energy, Draco Meteor, a coverage move like Heat Wave, and Protect. So I think giving it a move that can just crit without the need for Scope Lens and Focus Energy would be a really big deal, as it can still check Chindozo, but now it can probably run a Life Orb and an extra coverage move. I think this could be really impactful for Hydreigon, and while the move itself would be conceptually broken, I don't really think it does anything that actually makes Hydreigon itself overbearing. But it would still be a very cool move to give it that would definitely see a ton of play. We do still have one other pseudo legendary to talk about, and while its Sui form has its own signature move, the original form of Goodra actually does not. Now, Goodra is actually by far the weakest pseudo legendary in the game, and there's really not a close second. While it's had some success as this bulky Assault Vest pivot, and occasionally you can see Choice Spec sets work, Goodra itself is just a really bad Pokemon compared to the other dragons. The Hisui form at least has Shelter and Body Press sets that, thanks to its ability Shell Armor, can avoid taking critical hits, and it does give it, technically speaking, a actual niche, as it's a really good Urshifu check with Terra. However, base Goodra really doesn't have a lot. Its best abilities are Sap Sipper and Gooey, and while these are both okay abilities, it's not enough to make you use a Pokemon that has some pretty underwhelming, unoptimized stats. Goodra's third ability though in Rain Dish actually has a lot of merit to be taken advantage of, especially when it comes to a signature move, so I do kind of want to lean into that, as I think if we're going to make Goodra viable, this is the best way to do it. I want to call the move Dragon Fog, and essentially this is going to take a lot of inspiration from Bleak Wind Storm, but with a different secondary effect. We're going to give it 100 base power with 80% accuracy and allow it to hit both targets on the other side of the field. We are going to give it perfect accuracy in Rain, as again, this is meant to be a Rain Pokemon. With this in mind, Rain Dish suddenly becomes a lot more powerful, as you have a spread Dragon type move that no longer has to fear accuracy checks, and it would also allow Goodra to get some good passive recovery in. While in theory, Sap Sipper Goodra could still actually find some usage with this, and while the move could definitely be physical to take advantage of Sap Sipper, I think the need to not worry about Intimidate would be a pretty big deal for Goodra, and we're going to kind of make Sap Sipper irrelevant on this anyway in a moment. Because the secondary effect, instead of giving a stat drop, I think we're just going to make it completely haze the field away. This would actually make Goodra a really strong ally next to Intimidate weak threats like Palafin and Bastion Legion, while also giving raid teams a really good check to Archaludon in the mirror. Since you could easily go for this move and clear any sort of stat boost that would have otherwise been given thanks to either Stamina or Electro Shot. Not only this, but with an Assault Vest, you could pretty confidently take at least a single Draco Meteor to make sure this move lands. And if Archaludon doesn't have a special attack boost, its defensive boost might suddenly vanish, and a Pokemon like Bastion Legion could actually pick up a KO on it. I think this would actually give Goodra a serious chance of viability, and it's probably the best option it really has to become a viable Pokemon. While I'd really only use Goodra on rain teams due to the fact that this move is otherwise pretty inconsistent and Goodra is not the most impressive Pokemon without rain, I do think at least, especially on teams that have good fairy checks, this could actually become a very good Pokemon, and it would at least see some form of niche relevancy for the first time in 11 years. So what are your guys' thoughts on the pseudo legendaries? Do you think I made these moves too broken, or do you have some other suggestions that might be better? I'd love to hear them in the comments below, and while you're on the way down there, consider subscribing. If you made it this far, it's probably because you enjoy the content here, and I have a ton of other videos that I'm sure you'll enjoy, such as a series that we're doing on the channel where we're buffing different groups of Pokemon thanks to their stats and abilities that might need changing, or different videos where we talk about Pokemon and how they do in other formats that they're not legal in. If you love that type of content and a lot more of the analytical VGC stuff, I'm probably the channel for you, and and I would recommend helping us subscribe as we're on the way to 5,000 subs by the end of the year. Not only that, but if you want to give some extra support on the channel, consider becoming a member. Thanks to our current members being Josh Tiga Ultra Player and D0. Your guys' support on the channel means the world, and it really does help out a lot with the content. For just $5 a month, you get some early access to videos on Thursdays starting with our very next upload, as well as a chance to poll for different things like, for example, the next group of Pokemon we're buffing. Last time it was bug types, but next time we're gonna have options like the fossils and many other cool options that you guys might want to vote on. You also get some cool emotes on the channel, and it's just a great way to show your support to the two editors who kill it every week on this content. We have both Dose and Becca who do an incredible job on these long form videos, and if you want to see more from them, check out their links down below, as they both have their own content on the side. With that said, I'm gonna see you guys on our next upload. Until then, peace out, guys. Alright, give me just a second. April kept crawling near me, and I think that I'm mildly allergic to her. Drop a like if you're allergic to cats, etc.